Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. Once again, subcultures are arguing online of what it means to be part of that subculture. And today it's punks arguing over whether punk is actually political. The disconnect between online subcultures and what they are like actually in real life is like so crazy. In real life, you just go to the local shows, have a good time and have some fun. Online you get called a poser for wearing the wrong thing. Goodness. Do we have an interesting conversation ahead of us today? But before I get into all of that, let me introduce myself. My name is Cowder's Life, and on this channel we do video essays talking about things we see on the internet, and then we all discuss it as a community down in the comments section below. So if that sounds like fun for you, please feel free to subscribe. We're trying to beat this ratio. Yeah, because I don't want randoms watching my things. I want a nice wholesome community. Yippee, community. Anyways, if you're not new here, hello again, nice to see you. And today, instead of showing you Beyblades or small soldiers or any other sort of interesting thing from my collection, later on we'll be discussing my great co-host Skog. Skog deserves a shout out. But first, let's tackle the topic at hand, punk online. Basically what has caused this big debate online recently in the subculture of punk on TikTok is I saw one content creator do a comedy sketch being like, pretending to be a punk TikTok creator that's really out of touch.
Hey, I'm just jumping on here really quick to just support my point that punk isn't political. Punk is for everybody. Like, I don't think you guys get it. I actually have knowledge of this.
It's a comedy sketch poking fun at the absurdity of claiming that punk isn't political. It's a funny ha-ha hee-hee where I thought we would all laugh and be like, ha, funny observation of, when out-of-touch content creator who's just trying to secure the bag forgets that the thing they're profiting off, e.g. punk, is actually an incredibly politically charged thing. Funny moment, we can all laugh together, be like, ha, that's great, right? Well, no, because boom, off of that, I saw so much discourse and conversation online where people were arguing whether it isn't political, what it meant to be punk, who is a punk, and oh my goodness, it just seems so insularly focused, so like zooming in on everything rather than just being part of the scene and having a good time, right? And to me, like when I just start looking at this more and more, I think the TikTok actually just raises a really good point of how disconnected some people on TikTok are from the origins of punk and the culture which they claim to represent. I think one of the most painful takes I see online about punk, especially on social media, is like, well, it's evolved, it's not political anymore. They suggest the movement is simply about personal expression and having fun. But this completely ignores the fact that their personal expression, for punks at least, has always been political. That stereotypical look has a message. And I should say though, it's not deep if you just want to dress punk, really. Nobody's really going to care. Online, they may have an opinion, people might be like, well, you're just this, that, and the other. In real life, no one will care. Truthfully, the IRL punk scene, they don't care. They're just at their actual events. I find this conversation genuinely so fascinating because I have friends who are like IRL goths, emos, punks. I've managed to acquire them all. Like, it's like Thanos' gauntlet of like subculture. And they're just very much part of the IRL take on these subcultures. They're actually just getting involved in their communities and getting amongst it. So when I tell them about this online discourse, they all like scratch their head and they just look so confused. They're like, what do you mean people are arguing over punk being political? Punk is punk, punk is political. It's just so funny because online it seems people are just fighting for their authenticity tag or their license to be like, I'm punk or I'm goth or I'm emo. It's just very interesting, right? It feels like it's going to be a never-ending, Spider-Man meme pointing battle of being like, well, this is punk and this is not punk and I'm punk and you're not punk, and who wins? And ultimately, I feel nobody wins in these conversations. It's just one big eye roll. The IRL punk will not care if you just enjoy dressing as a stereotypical Vivienne Westwood, Sex Pistols-esque, capitalistic variant on punk. No one will care. They'll just be like, oh, okay, you look like that. Fair enough. But online, they'll be like, well, actually, are you the 5th-gen political warlord, overlord, punk? What do I mean by all that? I don't know, just this conversation is silly. The dilution of punk online is genuinely wild. Punk, though incredibly known worldwide for its music and style, was never intentionally just to be about that. That was just a growth out from punk, an artistic expression of punk. Punk itself was always about taking a stand. And if newer generations of punks think that punk is just some fun, quirky little aesthetic, it really does just water down the actual political movement. Long gone are challenging societal norms and political agendas. Now we enter in the age of getting likes on TikTok because I look like I'm some sort of Netflix concept of what being an alternative punk is. Yoo-hoo! Remember to buy my fast fashion punk clothes on the TikTok live shop. Yes sirree. Oh dear. Can I interest you in some punk activism? No, I want the studded jacket leather 5000 so everybody knows I'm the punk overlord of this middle class suburb I live in. Yeesh. And I do just want to say whilst I'm talking about this, once again, never ever an issue if you want to dress gothic or punk, whatever. Do your thing, express yourself accordingly. Maybe don't just say you're part of these movements, maybe, I don't know. It's fun to like an aesthetic, that's cool. It's one way to express yourself. But probably don't be like, yeah, I'm actually a diehard punk warlord, when you're probably not. If you're just head to toe in fast fashion and you don't really do anything in the scene. Like I'm saying, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying you're probably not part of the scene. Which is okay, you don't need to be part of the scene. Remember, punk originated in the 1970s as a genuine response to societal and political unrest. It was a form of rebellion against the conservative, capitalist status quo. And bands weren't simply just making music, they were really calling out inequality, corruption, and oppression. Their lyrics, their shows, and even their look, to some sort of degree, was a deliberate act of defiance. I feel like there's this misconception that punk was maybe just anti-establishment in some sort of vague way. You know, we just look a little different, that's how we're fighting the system. No, they were the real deal to some degree at one point. The goal really was to always challenge the powers at be. And you know, this was even obvious in its DIY nature, with punks, you know, making their own clothes, creating zines or zines, however you want to say it, booking their own shows. This was all as an act of taking the power away from the larger corporations and being a resistance against mainstream consumer culture. Yoo-hoo. You know that expression, sticking it to the man? Well, they really were sticking it to somebody at some point back in the day. Yes sirree. Yippee. The original punk's refusal to conform was so obvious. Just complete rejection of polished, corporate produced music. And its emphasis on just complete freedom when it came to self-expression were all deeply political acts aimed at dismantling structures of power and oppression. So given this, just this very quick basic history lesson, the idea that punk isn't political is honestly laughable. Even to a silly goofy goober, self-proclaimed silly goofy goober. Hey, I hold my hands up, so does Skog. Skog, pull up a paw. We're goofy goobers, we ain't punk. No way. Do we love learning about subcultures? Yes, we do. But are we no way whatsoever punk? Yes. Have we researched punk for a while? Yes. Is it clear that even to us, and you know, just mixing with people in the punk scene and going to some shows and whatever, it's very much a political agenda? Yes. So if little old me can understand that, how is it people in the actual scene who claim to be punk can be like, not political, bro, I'm just doing my thing? Zooey mama, I think you're kind of confused and a little mixed up, and that's okay. I'm just here to do a little video on saying why I think you may be wrong. Okay. I suppose a lot of that confusion does come from the modern day online variant of punk, right? Because imagine if you're a young person and you come across punk for the first time on TikTok. You're doomed. I feel sorry for you to try and actually find good resources of information there. All you're seeing is people focusing on how cool it looks to be punk, dressed in your spikes and leather. Zooey mama, sign me up. I want to be some Guitar Hero-esque character for real, no cap. I'm actually not wearing a cap. Skog, you're wearing a helmet, so I think you can join in this pun as well. Yes sirree. Yes sirree is my new heinous, by the way. Unfortunately, these new adopters to punk will be missing out on the deeper meaning. And that's a shame. We really are in the era of form over substance. And by that I mean looking cool rather than actually having anything of depth to you. Right, I suppose on video raps like TikTok, Why would you expect depth? Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo. Future Cowder's Life coming to you live here. And you know this is the future because I have a big old spot on my face. So I've decided to distract you all with my Hawaiian shirt. But then again, I've been told spots are perfectly natural, and so is my love for Hawaiian shirts. Anyways, as me and Skulk were editing back this part of the video, it kind of made us realize that it made it look like we were just looking at original punk through these like rose-tinted lenses, making everything seem far more perfect, far more better. You know, it's nostalgia. You hear these great stories, so it must be better, right? And I feel I should also, to make this argument fair, point out some of the flaws even punk had back in the day. So it's not just like this big lust and love for something that once was and never will be. One of the biggest issues of the original punk scene, and it's still an issue today actually, is the occasional adoption by far-right groups. For example, even within the UK, members of a far-right National Front tried to co-opt punk's rebellious image, and they would use it for their own agenda. This is why there's sometimes confusion if you ask older people what they think of punks. They're like, aren't they those racist haters? When in reality punks were actually like the complete opposite of that. It's just they've only seen what the media portrayed, you know, subcultures as, which were these like dangerous individuals that were here to do horrible things, which wasn't the case. Punks fought against these people and tried to push them out of the community. Hey, you can't steal our look, it stands for something. And it's wild they tried to adopt punk's look in the first place, because punk is very anti-establishment and anti-fascist. And of course, this led to many clashes between the original punks, who you know were typically very left-leaning and literal anarchists, battling these literal far-right infiltrators. Zooey mama. Terrifying stuff, really. Even then, punk was being twisted and used to fulfill other people's agendas, and in this case it was hate groups. Another issue within the original punk was sexism and misogyny. The early scene was very male dominated, and while there has been, you know, some big notable figures within the original punk community who, you know, were women, the space, however, hasn't always been as welcoming for women. Many female punks faced harassment or were marginalized within the scene, and this is all despite, on the outside, punk's very progressive ideals. The reality was it was actually different to that. Fortunately, the punk scene has done a lot to address these issues now in the modern world. Today, as you will see on the internet, there are far more women and non-binary individuals within the punk scene. That is something that's actually gotten better in modern times. And I don't bring any of this up to, you know, like get one over on the original punk or like bash it or anything heinous or weird like that. It's just simply to remind us that, like any subculture, punk had its problematic moments. If we're being honest, it wasn't always as pure or politically consistent as we might believe or want to believe. And with that short interjection, I'm now passing back over to Past Cow, who had no spots and a severe lack of Hawaiian shirts. But remember, spots are natural, and so is my love for Hawaiian shirts, I think. But it's also not just about like downplaying the politics of punk. There's also like a disturbing disconnect between what people claim to be punk and how they act in the real world. Talking point 2. There's this content creator called Hijackmans, and they basically made a video showing how they were at a punk gig. They were queuing outside, and there's all these people ready to go to this punk gig. They were all dressed up in their punk uniforms, but unfortunately, they all ignored the unhoused people that were outside the venue. People that were forced to live on the street as there isn't housing available for them. And the TikTok kind of is pointing out the fact of how all these people that are in the queue, you know, claiming to be punk, are kind of forgetting what being punk is about. Maybe stand up for the marginalized communities and fight for some good old social justice. The irony here is punk at its core has always been about helping those who are oppressed, whether that be, you know, standing up against the government, racism, or economic inequality. Wee woo, wee woo. This one is about that third, economic inequality. People who are unfairly going without. Basically, the TikTok was saying, no one else in the queue, gave any money to the unhoused people, the people living on the street, which seems pretty punk, right? And the comment section for this TikTok was just like a hot pot of mess, really, and conversation. Basically, a lot of the comments were along the lines of, it's not their responsibility, or you can't help everyone. And others just made excuses of how, like, giving money to the homeless isn't a requirement of being punk. This, I feel, just shows like the clear misunderstanding about punk values. Punks are supposed to be anti-capitalist and pro-people. Humanity. Yippee. And Bear Skog, don't worry. I think you fall under humanity. Does Skog fall under humanity? I think he does. Helping is a core part of punk. Yeah. The fact that people are like trying to defend selfish behavior is once again just highlights how disconnected people have become from the roots of punk. And wee woo, I know some of my audience here will be thinking, is Cal having a really terrible take here? Because what if he's not even considering that some people may not have money or whatever? Yeah, that is totally fine. It should be obvious that I'm never critiquing those people. If you do not have any change on you, or you don't have any food or water on your person to give, that is totally fine, you know? Never an issue. You shouldn't feel like a terrible, awful person if you just didn't have money on you to give to the person that was asking for spare change or whatever. That is totally okay. That doesn't morally make you bad whatsoever. I think that TikTok is just trying to raise awareness of how, like, in this big, long queue of punks, how only maybe 1 or 2 people actually spared some change or gave some resources to the people that were in need, which is surprising. But this is never to demonize those who do not give or can't give. It's just saying you would have thought perhaps more would have gived. I swear I'm not having a bad take. I did instantly consider that, right? Being like, well, maybe people shouldn't have change. But I feel like that's just the obvious answer. But I feel it's good to just say that anyway, just in case you were hurt by that. Because you're like, Cal, I'm punk, and what if one time I didn't have change on me? There's been like billions of times, especially living in a big city like I do, where someone's asked me for change and I just simply haven't had change on me or haven't had the funds to get them something, and that's okay. That doesn't make you a morally bad human. That's just the reality sometimes. And of course, others also pointed out, you know, they've been told it's not safe to talk to people they don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, in this world, it's not always advisable, especially if you're, you know, a vulnerable person or you're young or whatever. But in a queue of hundreds of people, you're probably going to be quite safe as long as you don't deviate from the queue. So if someone comes up to you and they're like, oh, do you have any spare change? Or whatever they may ask you, and you so happen to, giving them some money or whatever isn't going to land you in some danger. You're probably going to be safe in that situation. However, if they're like, come away from the queue and join me in my magical castle over there, which you can't see right now, don't do that. That's dangerous and silly. But there's a difference. Broadly speaking, yes, it can be scary to talk to people you don't know. And that rule of, you know, not talking to strangers is there for a reason. But also within that, there's nuance. And sometimes if you're in a queue with people, you're probably going to be very safe. Kind of. Right? Yes. Come on. Ugh. I feel like this, though, along with the other TikTok I mentioned earlier, really shows the larger issue at play here of punk's forgotten values. You know, it's always very exciting to dress up and listen to the music and get into that part. That's the fun part that many are attracted to, but they may not maybe embody the values of the movement. But what I'm saying is it's easy to throw on the spiky leather jacket, perhaps, but a true punk would probably show activism, empathy, and standing up for those that need a voice. And I say this awkwardly because you're like, he's not a punk. I know, I'm an observer. I observe. And I love interacting with people of all subcultures. It's very interesting. I love just picking their brains on these things. I'm just saying, if you quack like a punk, if you dress like a punk, surely you should do some punk things. Right? Me and Skog, personally, well, what are we, Skog? We don't want to label ourselves because it makes us anxious and then we get nauseous and a bit gaggy. So we're nobodies. We're just gonna sit on the bench. We'll take this one out. But yeah, I don't know. There just seems to be a real problem between wearing punk and living punk. And I feel with that in thought, the division between what looks like punk online and what actually represents punk isn't just limited to these like 1 or 2 incidences. There's like a growing gap between online punk and the offline reality, and I feel this is so true for all subcultures. How they're presented online as very superficial, very obvious stereotypes, and what it's like in practicality actually being parts of these scenes. Talking point 3, I think it's 3, but talking point 3, the divide between offline and online punk scenes. Gosh, the online version of all subculture movements really just tends to focus on the fashion and aesthetics. There's thousands of videos of being like, how to look like Goth Overlord 6000, like you just made The Cure 2.0 or whatever. Or there's like, how to be the emo swag lord, and that wasn't me referencing Carrington, that was unintentional. He just happens to be the swag lord. Or just like how to be punk, and it's always just like, oh, this just feels like an advert for freaking TikTok shop. Ugh. That thing really has done more damage to subcultures than anything in the last couple months. And online, there's just like so much talk of what real punk looks like. Like so much talk, rather than actually showcasing punk or the community. Like with a lot of these subcultures, actually, it's just always talk about what it means to be part of them, rather than just being part of them. It's how to look punk and be punk without actually discussing activism and, I don't know, community. Things that are at the heart of punk, right? And it's all due to that aesthetics obsession. TikTok, like many other social media platforms, is visual based. People get drawn into trends because of what they see on these apps. So it's easy to see and kind of understand why so many focus on punk as a style rather than punk being this real political movement. But by focusing only on the surface, people really do miss out on the substance of the culture. And that is a problem, right? Isn't it? I think so. And this is where like the disconnect between like offline versions of subcultures becomes so noticeable. In the real world, the punk community, much like other subcultures, are still inherently involved in their liberal ideologies and their original days of being like this liberated groups. So like actual punks are still very much involved in activism, whether that be participating in benefit shows, supporting local grassroots movements, and engaging in DIY culture across the whole, whether that be, you know, making clothes, setting up venues to make music and hold spaces for communities to get together and do their thing. Basically what I'm saying is these punks aren't spending their time online debating with the Spike Lord 6000 who's just got the leather spiky jacket and is listening to The Clash and the Sex Pistols. You know, that just never happens. They're just two iterations of punk that never mix. And you generally do see it more and more online now, but people are saying, like, if you want to get involved in these subcultures, the local scene is where you'll find it. And it's true. All these subcultures, they live and breathe in the local communities. And with like a little bit of research, you'll be able to find the ones local to your area. You know, whether that be for music or for activism, it's all there for you, right? But these spaces are where subcultures like punk live and truly breathe, not on TikTok comment sections, really. And I would say this honestly goes for all subcultures. However, with that, I feel I should also say, I know if you were like me growing up in the countryside, really out there, not really connected to a town or whatever, the local scene might not just be there. So there may be no local scene. So that is a bit of a sticky situation. So what do I suggest you do there? I mean, you just got to do the best with what you've got. Honestly, it's not a good one. I had the same problem when I was young, but obviously as an adult, you can move away and mix with like-minded individuals eventually. So you might just have to feel a bit like impostery syndrome when you're a youngster, when you know your kid still lives at home, but that's not your fault and you shouldn't actually feel like an imposter. You're just doing the best with the resources you've got, right? And I totally empathize with that, and I understand that, because when you're young and you want to express yourself and do your thing, but you can't because of the infrastructure local to you, that is a tough gig. I get that. Still punk, don't worry. It's just going to be tough for you to engage in that local scene and feel that real connection. But I don't want you to get disheartened by what you see on TikTok or some absolute goblin of a punk on TikTok being like, you're not punk because you're not in your local scene right now. But it's like, well, that may be true for some, but in the circumstances of someone living in a really rural area, that's not really their fault. They're just doing the best with their situation. Yeah. And also, that's not me just saying local scenes are flawless. You know, local scenes also have real world problems, whether that be weirdos or odd things going on. Yes, that does happen as well. I'm not ignoring that the local scene does have problems. And if you're a young person watching this video, it may not be safe to you to go to those scenes by yourself. So that's why it's always good to attend with, someone you know and trust really well, or an adult if you're, a minor. Maybe you can persuade your parents to go and try and get into the scene together. Safety first, and always take precautions, right? But within that conversation of like people doing their best with the resources they have, I kind of want to also talk about how even on TikTok, how even on online punk, there are some real content creators doing some great bits of work for the scene. It's not all just arguing in this horrible circular conversation of you're a poser, no, you're a poser, or what does it mean to be punk? There's people just being genuinely resourceful and educational and being great tools for new people wanting to get into the scene. And that is what I want to talk about, championing people in the punk scene that are actually trying to help out. And I think that's really nice and cool. So let's talk about that. Talking point, what is this now, like 6 or 5? I don't know, but punk content creators who are educating and inspiring. Yippee! One of the most positive trends we're seeing on TikTok within the punk community, or just in the subculture communities in general, I also see it a lot in the goth communities, is how to make DIY clothing. I think there's always this misconception that it's super expensive and it's going to be like this real taxing labor of love. But whether it's adding patches, ripping jeans, or just making alterations to clothes, or taking old clothes and turning it into new clothes, there are many videos showing how one can do that. And that DIY spirit reflects the true nature of punk. Yippee! Creating your own outfits, basically playing dress to impress IRL, freeing yourself, liberating yourself, being an authentic expression of you. Yoo-hoo! Very cool, very swag. I like that. Be yourself. I know it's tough to do, but if you can do it, that is pretty rock and roll, I would say. Now, I know I should also say with that, not everybody can, for a multitude of reasons, make their own clothing, whether it be they don't have the resources. I know some people generally just can't get hold of them due to their parents not allowing them to have them, or they just may not be able to within themselves be able to do it. And that is totally okay. You're doing the best you can, as long as you're always actively trying to, be a part of the scene. I'm sure you are part of the scene, right? Whenever I talk about any of these things, these conversations are always nuanced, and there's always exceptions, and that is totally okay. You're still valid and you're still real to the scene. But if you can, you probably should. That's kind of the ethos, right? Another awesome wave of TikToks I've seen within the punk community is punk is not just an aesthetic, it's a mindset. And there's TikToks breaking down the stereotypes. You don't have to just wear the leather jackets and the studs and all that Vivienne Westwood-esque Sex Pistols capitalistic expression of punk. You can if you want, but it's ultimately about challenging your beliefs, questioning the status quo, and fighting for equality. So what I'm saying with that is the punk that got their joggers and t-shirt from the thrift shop is just as punk as the punk that chooses to dress in the stereotypical image we perceive of punk. And that's not me also taking shots at that variant of punk, the stereotypical one. Super cool imagery. I have no issue with it. Truly, I don't. I think it's a really fun way to express yourself. Rock on, do your thing. You look like my favorite characters in Guitar Hero, and I love that. Super cool, yes. Punk is all about what you stand for, and with that, you can pretty much dress however you want. Yippee. Another awesome thing I've been seeing is people calling out brands who try to cash in on the punk aesthetic without actually supporting its values. So maybe they're fast fashion, or maybe they have unethical practices, or maybe they've just done weird, questionable things in the past. But people are calling out these brands that are trying to sell punk as this fun, packageable, commercialized aesthetic. And I think that's a good thing, spreading awareness. I think there's many creators trying to help new punks or people interested in getting into that subculture, avoiding the pitfalls that many may have faced prior to them, buying into the corporate punk trap. They are encouraging new punks and newcomers to support local artists, or maybe even make things themselves, or thrift, or getting involved in your local scene. There's many useful resources online, even on TikTok. Even though that's been the center point of this conversation of conflict today, there's still very useful, amazing resources to be used there, and those should be championed and celebrated. Woohoo! Also, I'm sorry if you're new here and you think I'm being satirical when I say woohoo. I notice sometimes I don't really put a lot of tone indicator or expression on my voice, or sometimes I just generally just come across as sarcastic, but I'm being genuine 99% of the time. And if I'm ever not, and I think people might be confused, I normally put in brackets, I'm being sarcastic here, as I know my voice can sometimes not give enough clues to my intention. Yes. I think my final thoughts on this, so the conclusion, are kinda, while punk TikTok has definitely currently taken a turn for the worse, much like I feel a lot of subcultures recently online, I'm seeing a lot of people voicing their stresses and concerns with being in those subcultures online, because it's just turned into these witch hunts of who's a poser, who's real, and it's all forgetting about actually getting involved in the scene and going to see the local bands and such. It seems like a stressful situation for all. And in the case of punk, it's people forgetting that it's political and they're forgetting its core values. But with saying that, there's also still so much good positivity going on there. And that's because inherently humanity is good and positive. And that's the thing we should always remember, right? Humanity good. I don't want this to be a humanity bad boo hiss boo. There's always a good conversation to have there, and conversation's not a bad thing. And through this, we can have a good conversation, and, you know, hopefully punks will come into the comment section and talk their piece and express their opinion on this. And I think that's always crucial and so useful. And I know it is frustrating, this discourse. It seems so like, why does this have to happen? Just go and get amongst the thing in real life. I understand it seems very online, this whole thing. I think with that, it's also just important to acknowledge that punk isn't dead, not at all. It's just evolving, it's just adapting with the times. And for those who are truly about the movement and truly care, there are still plenty of ways, online and offline, they can get involved and engaged with the community. So with that, I'd now love to pass the conversation over to you, the viewer. Let's discuss. And like I say in all my videos, there's never you have to agree with Cal, or otherwise we'll all turn on you and witch hunt on you. No, you're always allowed to express your opinions in my comment section freely. I always want that to be the case, an open channel of communication. I love conversation. I love being educated on these subjects. It's so interesting. And I really appreciate everyone taking the time to voice their opinions. I truly do. It really means a lot. It's not only just me that reads them, it's all my friends and family as well. They'll read them and be like, Cal, did you see that point? Did you see that point? And we all have discussions about it. And that just means so much to me. It really gives me a lot of purpose in life. I don't know if that's a tragic thing to admit. But yes, let's discuss this. Yeah, and anyways, as I said, Skog, it's now your time to shine. Come down, buddy. Do 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 do. Skog 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 Keeler. Do do. But yeah, no, this is my boy Skog. We've been holding it down for like a couple of years now. Skog, how old are you? Tell them. Oh, yeah, he's like 1.5. He's kind of shy, but he's got great little feet. Look at his healthy little paws. They're so healthy. You're so Skogcore right now. You have quite a big fan base here on YouTube. You get a lot of people in the comment section. You do. Oh, he's camera shy. He normally just likes sitting in the back. But that's Skog. He's my boy. He's very cuddly, and we sometimes watch movie marathons together, and I fall asleep on the guy. Kind of smells like Sleepy Me. You know, Sleepy always has a distinct smell. Well, Skog smells like how I smell when I'm tired. So that's a fun little bit of information. But I just want to shout out Skog, because he's always in my videos. He's always holding it down. He's always there for me as a little creature of confidence. So thank you, Skog. Thank you, viewers, for making it this far. I've been your boy, Cat is Life. There'll be another video essay here if you want to watch another of my videos. And Skog, do the outro. Oh, that was silly. Okay, bye.